Welcome to Living Your Greatness. Each episode, we bring on great people to inspire you to achieve your greatness. We discuss topics all related to health and wellness. Listen to world-class stories, learn valuable lessons, and turn knowledge into action. It is now time for you to unlock your inner greatness. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Living Your Greatness. This is your host, Ben Mummy, and today we have a new guest to the show, and his name is Connor Seidel. So for those of you that don't know Connor is a songwriter and a producer based at the Treehouse just north of Montreal in Canada. In the last few years, he has worked with Charlotte Cardin, Holubowski, Soeurs Boulay, among a number of other talented artists in North America. Connor has also developed the collective album recently called 1969, featuring Ariane Moffatt, Half Moon Run, Claudia Bouvette, and a number of other amazing artists. So Connor, it's good to have you on the show today. Welcome to Living Your Greatness.
Thanks so much for having me, man. It's such a pleasure.
I'm super fired up to have you on our show. And, you and I actually know each other from kind of way back, in terms of college. But to start off, Connor, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you spend your formative years growing up in Canada? And what inspired you to become both a songwriter and a producer?
Yeah, I definitely caught the itch of, it's funny because I find the career to work in music it's not that it's a cringy thing. It's just there's something about it. I always hesitate to say what I do, but I caught the itch very early, age 12, 13, recording every local punk band. Grew up in Montreal. I went to a German high school, actually. So my main language is actually German, funny enough. While through high school, I just was kind of geeking out over built a studio in my parents' basement, kind of the classic path. I think a lot of people doing what I do, geeking out on forums online, and just had a couple series of artists that I met that started to grow in the scene in Quebec. And then that kind of opened the doors for me at age 17, 18, and started growing from there. And I guess the progression into actually producing and songwriting, it started out with kind of being a studio guy, and then just realizing that the people I'm working with, I'm kind of making some suggestions that feel like they're on a production level. And then, so kind of falling into that role. And then as you continue working, you kind of realize, oh, I think I'm making songwriting suggestions. And now just realizing that everything I'm doing, I love to really care about the purpose and meaning behind it. And often that's at the conception of songwriting. So it's the last few years have been very much the transition into, songwriting, artist development. Just my role is really whatever it takes when I meet an artist, whatever it takes to get it to the finish line. So whether that's just the last final nudge of 5% or ground up, here we go, let's build the whole thing out.
That's awesome, Connor. Well, thanks for, sharing like your background. I actually didn't know that you had some German in you. And I do as well. So
no way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you spoke German. That's amazing.
Yeah, a little bit. I wouldn't say a lot, but sure. Just enough. And then, it was really cool just to hear too about how that, I guess, organically kind of developed, from going, just kind of giving tips and tricks, and then realizing, oh, wow, I'm actually doing everything along the lines of kind of a producer, as well as a songwriter. So that's cool. So before we actually take a deeper dive in that kind of direction, I really think it is important for our listeners, especially people who don't know the difference, between a songwriter and a producer. From my understanding, a songwriter is a musician who composes and writes and creates musical compositions, right? But then a producer, on the other hand, is recording creative and technical leader. Like they're kind of, giving tips or managing studio time or coaching artists and creating the songs very sound and kind of structured. So my question to you is, first off, like, is this at all aligned? Could you tell us more, about these roles? Is there things that I'm missing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's definitely, I think a songwriter is a songwriter. That's pretty straightforward. Somebody who composes, writes lyrics, you write songs, and often you co-write with other people. So that's the songwriting portion of what I do is quite clear in that sense. What does today have quite a hazy definition is the word producer, because traditionally a producer would be hired to work with an artist to get it done. So that meant, like you said, managing studio time, managing budgets, and then of course macro vision with the artist project, delivering it to the label, coordinating mixing and mastering, kind of that whole more traditional approach. Today, of course, producer means a lot of other things. If you're a beat maker, you're a producer. If you work in Ableton and do Foley sounds, you can be a producer. So it's a lot of different things. And, you can be a DJ producer who's performing live, but also makes tracks on the side and you upload them to Beatport and online. So it can mean quite a few different things. When I think of my role as a producer, I see it very much as kind of like I was saying before, I get hired to get it done. So whatever that means, whatever the status is at. So sometimes it's working with an artist who even self-produces, but they just need a little help finishing the final touches. So, just the last bit of details to make sure it gets there, coordinating the mix and the mastering and making sure everything feels right. But sometimes the role of the producer that I take on is finding a new artist, writing songs with them, building the kind of sonic vision and the entire brand around the project, and then quite literally engineering it or hiring an engineer and like A to Z. So I think the definition you have is very, very great. And maybe even the classic role of the producer as you defined it. Today, it's a lot of different things, but I definitely associate myself mostly with kind of the classic term of producer, getting it done, coordinating it from start to finish, but then being a songwriter as well. It just includes so many aspects.
All right. So you heard that, everyone. Connor is a doer, right? You get it done. So if you need help getting anything done with music, he's got it. Cool.
Trying to, at least, it's all an attempt, really.
So that's fair. I get that now. I get a little bit of better feel between the two. I'm sure my listeners do as well. But then you kind of said, there's a couple different types of producers. What would be the type that would be yours? Because I think you said it was
kind of like a classic producer. Yeah. I mean, again, depending on the project, sometimes I do take different roles. Sometimes I'm working with artists that show up with lyrics and I am more like in the laptop and doing like that style production. I don't know if I can really knock it into one term, because it really is a hazy thing. Each project requires such a different approach. I think I feel my best when I'm doing more classic style production, working with an artist, hiring session musicians, getting a gang together. I love to work with a lot of live musicianship and kind of not a band, but a gang of musicians at the core to create a live foundation. The music I like to work on often requires that approach. So it really does change. And I feel like this is a never ending learning curve of just understanding what my role really is, because it is different. You think sometimes you meet new artists and you think, okay, cool, I think I know what this is going to need for me. And then halfway through the project, you're just totally mind blown that you're learning new things and using new approaches to get to the finish line, whatever that means.
Absolutely. And I think that comes from like the creative process, right? Because not every song is going to be the same, right? There's always going to be different, even if you have an idea of like the style. So that actually leads to my next question. I remember when I met you, you were so passionate about the creative process as a producer. We would be in college, we would be sitting in class, and I would ask you, hey, how are you doing today? And you would say, man, I'm so tired. I was up late last night editing like for hours and hours and hours. And I'm sure at the start, because that was more at the start of your career, I'm sure, some of the skill sets maybe took more time or kind of more perfection to get that quality level. But focusing on like the creative process, it's kind of special, right? Like there's kind of a dance between the inner and outer and the unconscious and conscious mind and dreaming and doing, and you're a doer, and madness and method and solitary and kind of reflection of active collaboration, right? So what I'm curious about is, as a producer and a songwriter, how would you describe your creative process?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually don't know if my personal creative process is necessarily relevant, in the sense that all the artists I'm working with, I'm always trying to serve their project. I have this, 1969 collective album project that I put together recently, which is probably the closest thing to, in quotes, my project, even though I'm still kind of hiding behind the concept of the collective. But in general, I really see my my purpose is to serve other people. So if anything, it's always trying to help define what their creative process is and trying to find out, I have to try and figure out, well, what makes them tick? Where are their strong suits? Where are they potentially lacking that little point of productivity or creativity? Because that's the constant search, is finding a balance of creativity and like open-minded, limitless creation, but still getting something done, like that's the constant battle that is very, very interesting to find with each person, because it's just so drastically different. Some people like to work quickly. Some people need months to mull things over before they can move to the next step. So there really is no one defined creative process. It's just a bit of trial and error with each artist that you start out with, that you start something new with. And just hoping along the way you can get somewhere, and just approaching it from new angles at any point to just flip the table. And if something, it's really drastically different. Of course, I've got a couple things I like to do, but never the same. It's impossible. It's always it's human beings, human beings being creative. It's always something new every time.
Okay, cool. Well, that actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because I didn't think about that. It's true. Like a lot of your artists, right? They have a specific style, and they kind of need you to help, meet that style. Unless they're an artist, like let's say, if we look at Eminem, right? Every single one of those albums have been completely different over time, where he's changed, right? If you look at his 2008 and 2012, and then you look back all the way from when he started, completely different styles, right? So yeah, trying to help them meet their kind of needs. I definitely find that interesting, and I definitely know what you mean by that. If we kind of focus, let's say, on your album, right? Because you kind of said with that, you were able to really express your creative process. So for listeners, who haven't heard the album yet, how would you describe, that style of music?
Yeah. So essentially this album, 1969, it's a collective album. So there's 12 different artists that all contributed to it. It was a concept I had a few years back. I was kind of geeking out over just watching a bunch of film director interviews where they get to talk about working on projects for 8 to 10, 12 years, like heavy research on a project that they would need for a film. And I felt with the work I was doing, it was always like, okay, cool, meet a new artist, spend 3 months together, work on it. But I was craving something a bit deeper. Being an Anglo in the French Quebec music scene, I felt there was this kind of responsibility of mine to explore French Quebec music a little bit more, which I had only little bits of and nuggets from, but absolutely fell in love with. So I was thinking about this deep dive in late 60s, early 70s music, and ultimately through research and just finding a bunch of albums that I love, kept finding out 69 seemed to be an important year. 1969 just kept showing up. Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen and Jean-Pierre Ferland, although he's 1970, but there's a couple cheating moments in terms of influence. But there was a lot of 1969 throughout this project. And essentially the idea was to grab a bunch of artists from the new generation of artists here in Quebec, none that were alive in 69 or making music at that time, and kind of reference the bold arrangements, the bold lyrical choices. Just, there's this kind of, the idea was not to capture 1969. Let's capture the entire music scene of that era. It would be impossible. But I just loved this small niche trend of folk music that seemed to intersect with very high level, complex, orchestrated jazz arrangements and string arrangements and flute arrangements. So that intersection, which was a little bit in the UK scene, but also in French Quebec, that intersection was just very interesting. So exploring that specific niche musical context, kind of simple folk guitar music with complex arrangements, I thought was interesting. So I essentially presented that concept to these 12 artists, co-wrote a number of the songs with them, and then some other artists just wrote for the context of the project. It was about half and half. And ultimately this album came together as this kind of homage, looking back 50 years album. It's all original music. I didn't want to do just another cover album. I think they've been done enough. It was more just, I love sometimes placing creative boundaries when I'm working, choosing instruments that I think should essentially make up the framework, and using that specific year as a reference gave us all a very niche target to hit. And I think the idea was not let's on the nose hit it, let's more just draw influence from it. And each artist had their different impression of it and their own version of 1969 when they thought of it. So that's what it is. It's ultimately just a collective album with 12 artists all under one kind of hat and one tone and one kind of creative vision that I tried to hone in on as much as possible, but of course still with the major individuality of each artist.
Absolutely. And I find that that style of kind of music that you produce there, right? That throwback to the 1969s there, it's a golden folk era, right?
Absolutely.
And so I'd never heard of that term, right? I've heard of folk music or folk rock or stuff that I'm used to, or maybe stuff, you know, from a couple of decades ago. So it was cool because listening to your album, I was really able to be like, oh, like this is kind of different folk. Like I'm not used to this, but it's good, but it's different, right? So I think that will be really cool for, I think, a lot of people to experience, whether, you know, they're from our generation and they're not used to it, or whether it is someone that's already from that generation to get that throwback feel, but obviously, you know, with different artists, different experience, etc. So that's cool. So something that I do want to lead to next is, you know, you've worked with many incredible artists, right? And even in your last album, you know, 12 amazing Quebec artists. And overall, ever since you've been producing and being a songwriter, the music industry has opened a lot of doors for you, you know, from all that hard work and passion and kind of everything about you, right? So you have worked with a lot of talented artists in North America. One artist that I want to bring up is Charlotte Cardin. I'm a fan of her music. I really like kind of like the pop kind of electro jazz kind of vibe. But what is it like to create music with someone like her? Can you share a little bit about the experience?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Charlotte is like truly one in a billion talent. Like I think she is just so like at the core raw talent, exceptional in a way that like so few human beings are. We've had a number of chances to work together. Before this last album, Phoenix, we had done a number of singles together, and then I have quite a bit of scattered work that I had done on that Phoenix album in terms of songwriting, production work, little things kind of scattered throughout the whole project. And yeah, sometimes, I mean, it's obviously just such a pleasure to work with her. She's such a sweetheart, and we spent a lot of time. It was really a team. There's a big team around what you perceive and what is received as Charlotte. A lot of great people that are working really hard. So yeah, I got to play my role in that team, and it was, you know, just so fun getting to know her and getting to know that what you're creating is being created for a fan base that loves her, like just loves her, and she can kind of do everything. You know, we've done like a cappella, just her and guitar, Billie Holiday style, almost jazz songs, and then she's done super pop stuff, and she can kind of hit all the bases. So knowing that there's flexibility with her talent is amazing, but can also be a big challenge at times in terms of trying to find a small vision that or a consistent vision. Because when somebody, it's like anything, you know, you're in school with somebody who seems to be good at every subject, but then they have trouble figuring out what they want to do in life. So ultimately what became Phoenix, I think, is like it was a big challenging thing for us and for the team to get to this place where, okay, this is finished, because it feels like there's such unlimited potential for her. It's hard to commit to things at times. But it's been an absolute joy. You know, going to see the songs then played at Osheaga in front of however many thousand people is just such a rewarding thing to feel, you know, to feel it coming through these massive speakers on like the major, just in front of so many. It's wild. It's so rewarding. And yeah, it's been, I think Charlotte specifically, having worked with her, and has opened a lot of other doors, you know, just because she's so loved both here in Quebec, and this year, you know, nominated for 6 Junos with that album. It's wild. So that's just been opening a lot of doors, and I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of feel of, you know, kind of that experience working with her. And it was pretty crazy. I think I noticed that as well too, like the whole 6 Junos, you know, just in terms of the awards, which is nuts, right? You don't see that every day and by every artist. So definitely a raw talent for sure. Which song working with her was like your favorite that you helped produce?
It's tough. You know, because they're drastically different. I think there's a lot of things that I love in each of them. There's one called Passive Aggressive that, you know, I co-wrote with the team that I'm very proud of. But one, I think that specifically hit something special for me, just because I think with most artists, and that kind of like bleeds into the 69 concept, just sometimes things at their most minimalist core are the most powerful. So there's this one super jazz song we did called Over Me that was just a lazy Sunday morning searching for ideas, and just I had these kind of jazz chords sitting around that she ended up writing to, and it's just like the live take we did that day, no redone, like it's just that first live take after it was written, very imperfect with mistakes and noises, and there's just something about that that I find a little extra special. It's probably the least commercial and the least streamed or whatever, but there's something about that that I really really like, just because of how real that moment was. I think I'm always chasing for that real moment with everybody I work with. So yeah, I love that one specifically just for that reason alone. Also, it's just like, it's just her, and that's all you need. You don't need anything to dress it up. Like, she's just so talented. It's fun to just hear it in its authenticity.
That's awesome. So Connor, a question that I'm curious about is, kind of like I said before, you've worked with a lot of great artists. What do you believe separates a good artist from a great artist? Because we could be good,
Mm.
but if we really want to stand out, we got to be great.
Yeah. I know that this is I think a question you seem to like to ask, which it's a tough question to answer. Um, I think like one of the things that it really comes down to is just hard work. There are a lot of talented people, like so many talented people, but creativity, in my opinion, is a muscle. It's something you have to work at and work hard at, and you have to, be sourcing from a lot of different places. And I feel like I've met a lot of talented people that, they seem like all the boxes are ticked, but if they don't just sit down and work at it and try and get better and put together a live show that's incredible and put the hours in and write and write and write and write, sometimes it just doesn't quite get there. Like, I'm sure you can name 4 buddies or friends that that sing really well, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, but why aren't you doing that for a living? Why are you working this other job that you're not really happy with? So I think honestly it just comes down to the work, and then a lot of luck along the way. And I think it also, like, to be an artist in today's climate, you have to be so comfortable with putting yourself out there, and that's so hard to do. And not every talented artist has that ability, so sometimes they don't get the limelight, which is a little frustrating and tough. It's sadly just the way it is. I think it comes down to the work. It's just like, sit down and write some songs. um I think that's what it comes down to be fully honest. And I think I have to exclude like somebody like Charlotte out of that list, because her, obviously she puts in the work, there's no denying that, but her talent is at like an exceptional, even higher level, in my opinion. Like, that's like, you can put all the work in, you're never quite going to get that. Like, she's so born with such a great natural gift. But on all other tiers, I think it's just the hard work, just the hours in.
I definitely agree with you where like hard work and grit is definitely a foundation. And then consistency comes with that because
Yes.
you're obviously working hard. But I think even to add to what you're saying there, I think the biggest thing is, that early exposure, having a good coach or a mentor,
Mm.
kind of like yourself, right, on the producing side. So I think there's a lot of things that go into it. But one thing that I found really interesting that you said was, really looking to explore in a lot of areas.
Mm.
And I think you only know how to find your true style or the best version of yourself by really exploring as many areas, so then you can fail, right? Because you'll learn like crazy, you'll get feedback, you'll be able to, and then eventually transform that into your own style, which then makes you unique. And I think that's another thing too, is that kind of then leads to you helping stand out or going from good to great is
Mm.
all those kind of things. So those were like the things that I captured from you was hard work, being adventurous and exploring, and then obviously, being consistent, that's kind of what I got.
I think what you said is also super important that I probably wasn't thinking about, but finding great people to surround yourself with and inspiring people like that push you to be a little bit better and that make you constantly learn. That's so important. Sometimes if you're not in quite the right circle or people that aren't empowering you to do better, I mean, that's like fuel on the fire, having great people around you. So if it's a combination of all those elements, I think you said that so wisely. Like, you got to have good people around you, because sometimes they can give you that little nudge. We've all had those moments where we're sitting in the basement trying something, and it's just, why can't I get to that next step? And just having somebody who can maybe nudge you or just help you realize something, having great people around you that you can just run ideas by, whether you need to use their advice or not, just people to vent at, like, that's so important as well.
Absolutely. So having that community and a community where, people are lifting each other up, right, to feel better and to be their best, for sure. So leading to the next question, what is the greatest challenge most artists are facing today? And how do you feel the internet has impacted the music business?
Yeah, huge question for sure. I mean, I think maybe because I tend to work with a lot of singer-songwriter type artists, folk artists. And right now I'm in a bit of a series of working with artists on their third or fourth album. So they've been around like pre-social media and now dealing with it. I think generally, like, dealing with the internet and social media is a very challenging thing for artists. Like I was saying before, not everybody likes to share everything about their lives. Just because you're an artist doesn't mean you necessarily have those skill sets to be an influencer in that sense, and kind of expose. If anything, artists tend to not want to expose that parts of themselves and just be quite in their own spaces. So I think that's something that's really, really tricky. I think also in general, we have to think about, I don't know what the current stat is, but we're north of 700,000 new songs being uploaded to Spotify every month. So just like raw saturation, just exploring, trying to find your space in that is so, so tough. And then trying to seek editorial support or direct like help from Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon and Cube Music and all these amazing platforms. There's just so much out there. There's like too much, So I think dealing with that can be really tricky, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. You can carve out your niche, find your fan base, and find ways to generate revenue. One of the other challenges is also just to be an artist is sadly not just the artist side. That's a small portion of building the business that is an artist. It is a business. It's absolutely understanding where your fans are and what parts of you they like, and how your financial setup works and how royalties work. So I think, like, informing yourself on that front is like, knowledge is power, so much in what we do as well, especially because it's so saturated. And in terms of additional influence, I think right now, one thing I'm really interested in is like Web 3.0 space and how that could potentially impact artistry. Like, we've seen it in visual art and video, the massive impact. But at this moment, as much as, I'm searching for it and having a lot of conversations with really, I think, smart people about this space, there's not quite a solution that bridges Web 2.0, Web 3.0 for artists to release their music. There's still a couple gaps there that aren't quite making sense, but those are all interesting spaces that could potentially bring back the revenue power that, a lot of platforms are quite not quite distributing in the way that I think a lot of people would hope. So yeah, sorry, I was kind of jumping around there, but there's so many changes. In general, the internet is a huge challenge on a number of levels: social media, DSPs, all this stuff. There's so many things to consider.
I think you brought up so many great points, and it got me actually thinking too, when you were starting to talk about all the different platforms and then being that one number of many other artists and songs. But it made me think about too, how there are always too still opportunities, obviously, but trying to find that way, or sorry, trying to find that specific area to stand out in. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is I remember when I used to hear, about like, okay, social media, like everyone needs to get on TikTok, all that stuff. A lot of people were like, okay, yeah, it's probably going to be another good platform. But you know what? I'm already on all these platforms. There are so much content, and I know there is some artists that actually, that's how they got really well known, was they happened to go on at the right time. And now, let's say 3 years later, they got massive followings, and those followings have shifted over to their other platforms, right? So it just shows you too, it's you also have to stay up to date. You have to be open to all the things that keep coming out, with tech.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's always opportunities as well, even though there's so much
Yeah.
overwhelmingness too.
That's what I'm trying to think about, because especially like, again, for a 60s project, I'm the label for the album as well, which is my first attempt at exploring that. So I'm thinking about, for sure I'm seeing those limitations, although I'm so grateful for all the support we did receive from all the platforms. But I'm still curious about, okay, well, if not many people are looking into, the NFT space of artistry, well, being a newcomer in that area, there's potentially a higher risk, but also higher reward there. So there's always somewhere to look for something. And at the end of the day, with artists, just get out and play shows too. Like, you can still organically build a fan base. That, bars still exist, venues still exist. Yeah, for sure the numbers are not quite the same, and the fees are maybe not the same either, but it's not fully gone. So you can still get out there, and just like you said, the word grit is the perfect thing for that. It's because it's not just raw work, it's got to be smart work too. And so you can still be kind of grassroots about the approach. There are still examples of great bands that aren't playing the TikTok game, that are just like grassroots building up their fan base. And that's there's so many ways. You got to, open-mindedness is everything. It's like every business, every startup, you got to be pivoting with every step. Every week something new comes out. You got to try and stay in tune with it, as much as you can.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. And so this brings me to the next question, which is, what recommendations do you have for fostering more creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the music industry?
Yeah, I think right off the bat, like for fostering creativity, is I'm a breaks guy. Like, I love to take breaks. Like, if something is not working, take a step away from it. I feel like, probably the nights you're talking about in Cégep in college, where I was up until 4 a.m. editing. You're not making great decisions on hour 9. You're just not. You think you are, but you're not. And maybe at those more formative years, you're kind of learning a little bit, and you're learning basic techniques, which is one thing. But now at this point, if you're on hour 11 of a songwriting session and there's nothing that you're excited about, take a step away. Like, it's not happening. So I love the philosophy of just, let's see how this feels tomorrow, because time brings perspective, for me at least. So yeah, I think just taking a breather is really, really good for fostering creativity. In terms of innovation, it's like, I'm still reading all the time too, like looking for new books. Like, I know you're clearly a Tim Ferriss fan if you're talking about good to great. And just like constantly source information. But I think what I was trying to say before is, like, to live life. Right now I'm just wrapping up I was working with an artist right before we jumped on, and we've written 22 songs to ultimately cut it down to 12 songs. Like, it's just been so much work, and we're heading towards this final stretch. And he called me this week and he's like, I think we just have to try a little bit harder for one more. Like, let's just keep going. Like, let's do it. But the problem is, neither of us have, like, we've been doing this for a couple months straight now. Neither of us have gone on a vacation since we started working together. Neither of us, we're still reading and listening to new music, but the tank is a little empty in terms of new sources. And I feel like that applies to both creativity, but also innovation. Like, it's important to step away from everything to be able to come back and actually want to innovate. It starts with like the desire, and that requires some space. Yeah. And I think the other key thing about entrepreneurship is to build your team. Like, have great people you can trust. For me, it's great engineers, great mixers. I work with an incredible manager that I love to death, Lori Lee, based in Toronto. So having those few people that you can just kind of count on for well-intended advice, having those few people around you can help you then scale up ideas and make them bigger than that first kind of flash that you have in the kitchen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think you nailed it for all those, especially creativity and innovation. Like, it's true. They always say, like, some of the top creativity or kind of innovation ideas come from people that, literally walk out in nature, and take breaks and disconnect and reflect by asking a better question to then get a better result. Right. So, I don't know how to apply that obviously to the music industry, but in terms of, no, I definitely agree with you there. And then in terms of entrepreneurship, I also definitely agree with that as well. But okay, cool. So I know you've produced a lot of songs, and, it's probably hard to pick one, But what is, I guess, like the song that stands out, maybe in terms of what things went well and then not well, and then eventually at the end product, you're just most proud of, like in terms of like, oh my God,
Yeah.
everything is just connected, and oh my God, like, so yeah, what would that one song be?
I really don't think I could place it on one song because it's like everything is so different. I like to look at projects as bodies of work. Like I still, even if it's not necessarily how the industry works, I still love to think in the album context. It's really hard to pinpoint one. Like if you ask me about an album I worked on, is there one song that worked out really quickly or to hit that? I like to call it the voodoo.
Okay.
Like when there's sometimes every album you do, you try and get 9 to whatever 13 songs that are going to make up this body of work. There's always one, and there's always one that doesn't, but there's always one that hits this kind of voodoo. There's some combination. You take all the individual elements, they're all cool, but when you put it together, there's just like this, whoa, what's going on here? So I call that the voodoo. Every album, there's always like one that kind of hits the voodoo. I don't think I can give you one. It'd be like cheating on you, like it's not possible. But there's definitely moments with each artist. I'm thinking about this guy Elliot Maginot I worked with. There's this song called Emilio, the opening song of the album. Just something happened that just feels so cool and so special about that one. And then with Charlotte, that bass line for Passive Aggressive came out. We were listening to like old Mario songs, and I just started playing. It's like, oh, this is something. So it's like every song has a moment, but there's definitely not one thing to take home because it's like seasons change. I'll have a very different answer in the spring versus summer versus winter, of just what my personal tastes are.
I think that's totally true. I think it's hard to pinpoint one. I was just trying to put you in the hot seat there, and try and see, if there is any biasness anywhere. But
sadly, no, I can't give you the juicy answer, man. I can't give you the gossip.
Awesome. So I do want to go back now to your album that we talked about a little bit earlier, 1969. It includes, all the original music dedicated to the late 60s, kind of like you were saying before, and it features 12 talented artists from Quebec. So what was your why for creating this album?
In all honesty, the initial spark for it was quite, I don't know if selfish is the right word, but I kind of just wanted a context to be able to work with people I love and with friends. So many of the artists on the project are very, very close friends. Matt Holubowski and Claudia and Jason and Elliot Maginot and like they're all such close friends. It was selfishly just having a context to work with everybody. And then at the same time, to also reach out to new artists that I hadn't worked with that I just admired their work, like Louis-Jacques Cormier and Half Moon Run and Ariane and Safia, like all of them, So I think the initial why is quite selfishly that, just for the process. I mean, really the process of this album is why I did it. Any results after that were not on my mind. We didn't make it for radio. It's quite counterculture in terms of musicality. It's not for streaming. It's kind of like a cooking album you throw on while you're cooking with friends, something that's very subtle and just hanging in the background. That was kind of the idea with it. So the why is really just to do it, like to spend time here at the Treehouse and explore a concept. And like I said before a little bit, also to explore some of those outside of the music challenges that I felt I wanted just more insight. I wanted to get into the weeds of, well, what does it look like creating a label and dealing with the contracts and dealing with the scheduling and all of those bureaucratic things. I was quite fascinated with knowing how the sausage is made on that end as well.
And also I think too, introducing something that a lot of people aren't familiar with, right? So even if you are into, let's say, folk, kind of like what I was saying earlier on, the golden folk era, like I had not heard of that, until putting it on. And I do agree with you where like I like it and I find it's good background folk, right? Because you have music for different feelings, right, based off your moods and stuff.
Absolutely.
So no, I definitely agree with you in terms of that. And something though I want to kind of hit on here. I know your 1969 album, there's a story behind kind of every song, and I found that really unique, right? Because there are artists that are more, how to say, meaningful in terms of there's a why of kind of why they did it.
Sure.
But can you share some of these stories with our listeners so they get a little bit more context?
Oh yeah, I mean, every song, I think there's some kind of there's definitely something behind each one. It's a very, I think, or we tried to make it a very meaningful project, at least to us creating it. Of course, the songs where I'm a co-writer, I have even deeper insight on them. Like there's one song with Safia Nolin specifically. It was the first time we had met kind of before, but it was the first time we were really hanging out and trying to write. And it's the first time maybe the second time she's ever co-written with anybody, which is wild, for her music. It was always her. So we met, and she was just coming from a CHSL and CHSLD in French, where she does these like 1 hour a week. She goes and spends time with somebody who's going through some troubles and just keeps company with them, which is already honorable in itself. She was coming back, and she just spent time with this woman called Liberia. She was a trans woman, I believe from Mexico, South America, who had come to Canada in, I think, the late 90s. Being a trans woman, Canada is definitely a very positive place to be. And I think Montreal is a very liberal and open-minded city. So it felt like a natural move for her. And she was just telling me about how insanely wonderful this person is. And the other flash I kind of had when I met Safia was, well, you should write a song in Spanish. Neither of us speak Spanish, but there's just something so bold, and I love her. She's so colorful, and this woman that she was describing is so flamboyant. I was like, let's try and do this in Spanish, even though neither of us speak it. So just naturally, this song came out where we're talking about this woman, Liberia, who's essentially, we're just describing her on a night out, describing her almost like a Jesus who's walking on water, which is one of the lyrics, but she's really just on the dance floor. It's just a total homage to this wonderful human being. And it just came out. It just flowed so naturally. And it's compared to the rest of Safia's music. I wanted on this project to have a couple contrasts. It wasn't just let's call folk singers and do more folk music. So in this case, this song is super bright and super almost childish at times, when Safia's actual music is quite dark and heavy, and I love it. But it was fun to create that contrast with her. So every song has like some kind of a thing like this, where like we really putting a lot of thought and stories behind it. Otherwise, it's not worth it,
Oh, that's awesome. And could you share a couple more stories? Like, what about a Half Moon Run? What's their story?
Yeah, I mean, so Half Moon Run, I'm not a writer on the song. And the guys, I want to say they're quite cryptic when it comes to their lyricism. They like to kind of keep the stories for themselves, which is something I totally respect. Half Moon Run was an artist I was definitely intimidated to reach out to, because I'm just such a massive fan. I love the guys. And I was kind of definitely nervous just having them in for the first time, and even just on the Zoom telling them about the project, but yeah, they actually had a number of songs they sent through thinking, hey, do you think anything in this batch might work for the project? And immediately my girlfriend pulled out this song Fatal Line that ended up being on the project. And I mean, it's just, these guys are so explosive. If you've ever seen them live, like they're just so, it's just raw talent. Like they're three guys, they're each such strong characters and personalities, and it's not clouded with additional things. It's just three guys in a room. And I think that was so special to make sure that essentially while producing this song, my job was just to stay out of the way, like just let them do their thing and make sure we're having the right moment, make sure that we're set up at the Treehouse, doors are open. And then I brought in string arranger Antoine Graton, incredible string arranger, who did this kind of wild and fairly bold string arrangement on top of that song. And so, yeah, it was a blast. And, I also brought in engineer Ghislain Luc Lavigne, who loves that era of music as well, and who brought a lot of expertise to the project. But yeah, basically with the Half Moon Run guys, it was like, how can I be out of the way? Like, how can I be the fly on the wall to just let them do their thing?
And then capture it, right? Capture all the moments and put it together, and then make all the tweaks, cool, and edits. That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
And something that I did want to just kind of catch on here, which you actually had mentioned, is you mentioned the Treehouse. So can you give us a little bit of a description of your Treehouse and tell us more about it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the Treehouse, it's a studio up north, 45 minutes from Montreal, in a town called Saint-Adèle. Originally created by my very, very close friend, David Laflèche. He built the place 8 or 9 years ago with a partner at the time. And Dave was a musical director by trade, recently retired, very early, but recently retired. And he just built this stunning place. It's all windows. It's just like this magical place, so close to the city, but you feel like you're 20 hours deep in nature. And we met a couple years back, and just we have this immediate connection. We just like, we love each other. It's like a long lost brother in some ways. And he wasn't sure about the future of the studio at one point, and I told him, like, Dave, I should totally, let me just rent it from you for 3 months. And that became 6 months, became a year, until eventually we just looked at each other and said, hey, let's partner up. So now we're both managing the space together, and we mostly use it just for our private projects. Every now and then we will, have friends come in and grab it for a weekend. But, Dave is now producing and writing with a ton of artists. I'm doing the same. So we're really just using it as our home base. And it's a dream up here. It's I've had studios in the city. I've had the no window studios for so many years. It's just nice to be out in nature. And of course you do have to deal with things like, well, right now it's raining and I can hear the rain hitting the roof, but it's worth every bit of extra noise or studio technical issue, because I'm not very clinical in the way I work in the first place. Even on the 69 album, you hear cicadas ringing in the mic and wind, because I had the musicians outside most of the time. We were like right beside the barbecue, close enough to the ketchup. That's where we were setting up the microphones, just so that it would be a positive experience. So yeah, the Treehouse just forces that. It just kind of forces this good time. It's been 3 years I'm here now. Every time I walk in, jaw still drops. Like, I'm still like in awe of the space, and windows on all sides, so the light just hits in beautiful ways. It's a sanctuary.
That's awesome. No, thanks for giving us that context, because I'm sure right now any artist who has been to the Treehouse listening can probably resonate with a lot of those feelings, probably every time they come, or those memories that have been had, or not only that, but just in general, when you think back of, where you created some, where were you, right?
Yep.
And yeah, being in nature and having those, how do I say, like, that beautiful environment, but also challenges too, right? Because Mother Nature is right there with you. Cool.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Connor, what is one life lesson you've learned from songwriting and producing music?
Yeah, interesting question. It's like there's a new one every day almost, it's like constant learning. I feel like I maybe gave it out before already, but just space, like taking time. Like, maybe that's just my motto right now. Also, just, I don't know, just I'm trying to have a lot of self-awareness. Like, if I don't think I'm the right person to help somebody, I'm definitely the first person to say it, So I'm trying to find, really at the core, like, great human matches I want to spend, because, it's like all work. You spend so much time doing it. You have to do it in a way that you enjoy. Sometimes I forget that it's like an indulgent career. I should indulge in it. Sometimes you get lost in your laptop and just working. So it's just like surrounding yourself with good people, and it's almost irrelevant what the music is or what the genre is. Just finding people that you want to spend your days with, that are also talented and doing great things and have the right intentions. That's just been like that's what this year is about for me. It's like knowing when to say no and when to say yes to the right projects and right things. And then taking space, don't do the 16-hour days. They don't lead to anything. They just don't. They lead, like, basically, if you book yourself a 16-hour day, guaranteed that work is not really much more than 5 hours of focused work with good, being well fed and having that time to go play tennis in the morning before, like trying to structure my life a little bit better so that when you're in there and you are getting creative, you're in the right mindset.
Absolutely. So what I got from that is slowing down, but also having more balance, right? Because we know that too much of anything isn't good, right? Too much fitness, too much work, right? So having more balance, slowing down. And then you also said to who you are deciding to associate your time with, right? So having artists that, from a professional basis, but also personal basis, kind of lights your fire a little bit more. So that's cool.
Absolutely. I think passion feeds passion. If I didn't work with other people, I would have not much passion. I'd maybe try at things, but it would be easy to lose it. Like, I feed and fuel off of other people's ideas. So if I'm working on like a super soul 70s album, I love to dig in and find those references and find out what makes them tick. So, and then I kind of get obsessed with it too, just by proxy of their passion.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. So Connor, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, which is, as you know, the purpose of this podcast is to inspire millions of people to achieve greatness and enhance their overall personal well-being. So what is your definition of greatness?
Oof, yeah, it's a tough question. It's like all things, success and greatness. It's so hard to define. I think greatness is really like a self-defined thing. You have to find out what it means to yourself, and then come to terms with, you know, what is the best version of myself that can exist, and then try and do as many things in your life that that lead to that. You know, greatness can only be how I see what my potential is. And I like to set realistic but also ambitious goals for myself. And all I can try to do is every day just keep hacking at it. You know, I think that's the closest thing to greatness I can strive for or think about.
I think that's a good perspective, because it's true. It's everyone has a different vision of what greatness is, right? Like you could be a freaking great father, you know, and that's
Mm,
huge. And I've said that before on this podcast.
mm,
Or you could be a really great athlete, or you could be a really great producer, as we spoke about. But it's also knowing, okay, what are things that are meaning to you, that are important to you? What are levels that you want to reach that you think is a
mm.
level of greatness, and unlocking like your true potential. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with you where it's you have to define that level, you know,
Yeah.
of what you're trying to unlock, right?
And then work towards it, you know, or do your
Yeah.
best, and know that, you know, if you miss a day here and you slip up here, it's all good. Like it all just has to be an attempt, because it's like constant learning. It's like anything, you know, you dream to buy a car, you dream to buy anything, then you get it, and then it's not quite, but so it's just like that constant striving for like personal growth. That for me is way more, a much better line of sight for myself than, you know, physical things or financial goals or anything like that. It just has to be like that balance is what I'm trying to, that to me is, if I can kind of get there, that would be greatness for myself. And it's something I'm constantly working on.
No, for sure. And I'll check on you with that. Hey, I'll check in.
Nice.
Hey, you know, how's everything going? Are you working too
Good.
hard or too little? You know,
Please do. Yeah.
so I'll make sure to check in there. Are you getting your nature walks? You know,
Love that.
and who is a future guest that you would like to see on this show?
Oh, that's so interesting. I'm just thinking about people around me that I love to have these kind, because I feel like this is so awesome. It's just been like a great empowering chat of just, you know, betterment, self-betterment. So I'm trying to think about who does that for me in my entourage. Uh, you know, funny enough, I would love to see, selfishly, I would love to see my partner here at the Treehouse, David LaFleche. I would love to see how he navigates this conversation with you, because he's just currently living such an interesting life. Like he was a musical director at a very high level for 25 years, so running major shows, National Canada Days, and like really big TV stuff as well. And recently, I think it was at age 49, decided to say, yeah, not for me. I'm going to kind of switch my path and kind of retire early. And so he's just navigating this entire new life, but he's still so young. And I just find that, like exactly what we were just talking about, he's just defining for himself the life he wants to live and what success and greatness is for him. So selfishly, I would just love to hear you ask him similar questions, just to see where that would, where his brain would take that. Cause I find he's currently at such an interesting place in his life where he thought he had a vision of success for himself, and then ultimately just decided, yeah, no, I'm going to completely flip the script for myself and try something new. And I respect that so much. So I think he would have a lot of interesting things to say.
Absolutely. No, it sounds like it. Well, I'm totally up for it.
Mm.
So yeah, if you're able to connect those dots, or
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
connect
Yeah,
us
of course.
together, I'd love to have him on the show, and I would love to explore, you know, some of these areas with him, and also hear about his story, and also hear about, you know, his next kind of journey here, you know,
Yeah,
kind of talk that about him. That'd be really cool.
I think you'd be fascinated. Yeah, he's incredible talent, like just incredible person. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Connor, where could our listeners go to connect with you online, hear your album?
Yeah, I mean, to find out about me, you can always hit my Instagram, but I imagine you probably want to check out the album before me, because I'm always hiding behind it. So yeah, you know, Instagram is kind of my one spot of existence. And, you know, on wherever you listen to music, you can find 1969. The name of the artist is the 1969 Collective. So you can find us on Amazon, Spotify, Apple Music, Cube Music if you're in Quebec, Deezer if you're in Europe. We're all over the place. So check it out. And, you know, if you're a fan of any of the artists specifically, you can also just use them as a gateway into the album, and you'll find, you know, the songs on their profiles as well. So, you know, that's been the fun thing about this project, is that there's kind of lots of access points. You know, each artist is a bit of a vessel to tell the story of the full thing. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Gary. So I will make sure to include all that information there, just so people know where to go, you know, for your Instagram,
Amazing,
your website or landing page. And then also too, I think to add to not only, you know, the music platforms, but you and I had spoke about, you know, the stories, right, of each of the songs.
yeah.
And I think you could probably describe better than me, but scrolling down your landing page,
Yeah.
then there's like another part, right, that you click.
Yeah, so we've shot. I had an incredible director. His name is Lou Pascal Tremblay. Shoot all on Super 8 film. So we only had a few minutes of footage per day, but all on Super 8 film. He shot a full documentary that's going to be coming out May 17th. That covers, you know, it's a 5-6 minute video, still quite a short documentary that's going to cover the whole process. And with each artist has an artist capsule. We call them artist capsules that they narrate. It's just a minute kind of following them in studio and them talking a little bit about the era, what it means to them. So yeah, you can find that on our website. There's an artist capsules page. We haven't launched all of them. Even though the album is out, we still have, I believe it's 5 artist capsules that we're still going to be rolling out over the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that as it keeps coming up. But it's cool, you know, if you have one artist that you love on the project, you can kind of just get their little nugget of passion or love about their song or about the era in general. So those have been a real fun way to give a visual access to the project as well.
Awesome. Okay, great. So yeah, make sure to scroll down on the landing page, and then you'll be able to access that. I think some of them are on YouTube as well too, right?
Yep. Yeah. They're all hosted on YouTube, 1969. But yeah, our website is definitely an easy point to find that. And of course we have the vinyl, and, you know, it's all the kind of stuff that you love about your artists. Hopefully we're checking all the boxes for that stuff.
So yeah, Connor, I just want to end off today's discussion. You know, thanks for being here. Thanks for making time for the show. It was a pleasure, you know, to reconnect with you as a friend, but also to have you on, you know, from like the professional side too, and just hang out and just be, you know, two people face to face here hanging out. So it's been a pleasure to have you on our show today.
So grateful to have done it. It's fun because I've had so many ways of talking about this project, and where you're coming from, which is a completely different angle than, you know, because obviously you care about the music, but it's so interesting how you're curious about how people tick. Like, it seems like that's, you know, something that you're trying to get at. So it's fun to think about it in a different way, and not just about the music, you know, more kind of psychology behind it and the motivation behind it. So yeah, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you for listening to the Living Your Greatness podcast. If this show has added value, please subscribe, leave a rating, and make a review.